working?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, everybody. Yeah, it seems extraordinary, that now it's the 14th year. A lot of us can't even remember what the fullness of the revelations that WikiLeaks, Julian and Chelsea Manning provided. That it would go on for 14 years, innumerable court cases, scandal and disgrace falling upon, as a mantle falling upon the Swedish prosecuting authority, the Crown Prosecuting Service, judge after judge after judge in the United Kingdom, and the National Security Section of the Department of Justice, and the CIA's involvement in spying on Julian and Mike Pompeo, who actually boasted about contravening the conventions of asylum in his latest autobiography, where he spends 5 or 6 pages crowing about what he had manipulated the CIA into, but just also suborning the governments, the United Kingdom government, the Australian government, the Swedish government, and the government of Ecuador. And it's a single man named Julian Assange in a cell without recourse to great wealth, without recourse to guns and armies and secret services of any kind. Just a single man in a cell or in a single room for 14 years. It seems more than disproportionate. It seems very weird that this could actually happen. You remember Alexander Dumas's book, The Man in an Iron Mask, that he spent 15 years in just wearing an iron mask because nobody wanted to find out who he was. He was locked in the Bastille. So the parallels to Julian's position are beyond the capacity of reasoning, and they fall into the area of mystery and the extraordinary. Anyway, that's a start to comments. Just to see what these states have conjured up to ruin Julian. Absolutely ruin, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. What they've conjured up, which has brought disgrace to all of them and worry to us as a people. Of course, as a family, we are, vitally engaged, but as a people, worry.
Another thing that stands out poignantly is the endurance that you and those that care in his family have. And it seems only so recently that the New York Times, El País, The Guardian, Der Spiegel have issued a statement on this, and you'd think that this would have occurred sooner. And this rose in me, at least, this desire to know, what can we do to help support? Why this sense of abandonment that you see when you find this? What is there that we, all of us that are here, and all the folks that will be seeing this, can do to support?
Well, very simply, we've been encouraging people to contact their congressperson as we travel around. At the moment, there's a Dear Colleagues letter calling for Julian's freedom being circulated in Congress. And I think it's got 4 sign-ons. It's led by Rashida Tlaib. And so, ring your congressperson, encourage them to sign on to that letter. That's what we've been asking people to do as we travel around. There's also a petition outside that you can sign and put down your email address so that we can stay in touch with you about actions and talk to you directly about different things that are going on at the moment. But yeah, really, taking part in democracy, taking part in your democracy, I think is what we encourage people to do. The power rests with us, and reminding people that, that we delegate our power to our elected officials, and that we have to keep them accountable by telling them what we want.
Thank you. And for those that don't know, Gwen Moore is our congressperson here, and there are plenty of others in the state. I think Wisconsin has 7. So I invite you all to call them, and maybe we can Google Merrick Garland's cell phone number and give him a buzz too. So let's get some questions from the audience. Who has a question? My friend in the back.
Yes, hi, it's Pam Richard from Peace Action, Wisconsin, and we're longtime supporters of Julian Assange. If you go to our website, you can find Assange Defense MKE, and we'll have information posted there on how you can help Assange. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any questions too, friends? In the back.
Is the government of Australia trying to help? It almost seems like it's not.
Is the government of Australia trying to help? It almost seems
Yeah, Australia, the support for Julian among the people in Australia is, unequaled around the world. I think the last poll was 88% of Australians, agreed with the statement that the government should intervene and bring Julian home. And so what we've seen now since the last election was this popular support flow up into the parliament. And so now we have a Prime Minister who is, recently after that letter that you mentioned, after that letter he came out and said he'd made representations to the Biden administration to bring this matter to a close. He's made statements in the past saying things like enough's enough, and he doesn't see what purpose is served by Julian being in prison. So for the first time, Julian has a state that can represent him on a diplomatic level. Just last week, the highest representative of the Australian government in the UK personally went and saw Julian, so was able to go inside the prison, see for themselves the conditions that Julian is being kept in, and also hear firsthand from Julian, what he wants and what his circumstances are. So that's the first time in like 12 years that the Australian government has actually done anything of that nature. I mean, previous governments, as John said, these governments have been suborned and complicit, being complicit in Julian's persecution. So it's really important that that step has been taken now that this government is doing something different. But I think it's really important to stress that, that's come up from the ground up, from the upswelling of support for Julian amongst the Australian people. That's the reason I believe that the government there is actually doing something.
Thank you. Anne. And also a special thank you to Anne for helping make this possible. Those that don't know Anne, back to you.
First of all, thank you everyone who came tonight, and thank you so much for our special guests here tonight. In this country, we saw in your film much of the drama around the hearing that lasted for 19 days in the UK. But in this country, the New York Times didn't cover it, except one day that Daniel Ellsberg testified. Computer Weekly covered it more than any other mainstream media, and Kevin Gostola from Chicago covered it. But it was not really in the news. How can we get our media to be responsive to the fact that we want to know what's happening with Julian Assange?
How do you get him to respond to anything that long? I went and saw Robert Kennedy, who I consider a great man. He put his hand up to be the next president of the United States.
Yes. vaccines.
Especially for vaccines.
He issued a tweet after we spoke, which goes to say, it was quite brilliant in its condensation of the essential elements of concern around Julian Assange and around the First Amendment. There is no America without a free press. There is no free press without a free Julian Assange. That unpacks, the first sentence unpacks really well. The First Amendment is the first of the 10 items in the Bill of Rights. It goes to say that the government will make no laws about free speech or press freedom, about assembly and about religion. It's the essence of the United States. Every child that's born in the United States is born within and under and embraces the Bill of Rights, and particularly the First Amendment. It is the air that the citizens of the United States breathe in and out. It is symbiotic with democracy. Free press and democracy exist in a symbiotic relationship. You take one away, you don't have the other. That's the end. So Roberts, God bless him, Roberts' tweet, if you remove the free press, the question is, what then is the United States of America without its Constitution? So in answer to Anne's question, we, if I may join you as an honorary citizen, we together insist that the illumination of the United States among other nations is the First Amendment, and we continue to pursue it and to pursue its enactment in whatever way we can, whenever we can. This also says that our involvement in politics is not partial. It doesn't end every 4 years. I mean, so with men like Kennedy putting their hand up to be president, now it has two essential, fundamental foundations with him. One is we've got to give him a hand, if you believe. Even if he fails, sorry, not a good word, not a good phrase. Even if he is not the next president, the enthusiasm, whether you're Republican or Democrat, of choosing an appropriate person counts a lot. Now that is to say, if he's not president, how we go about support of his wish to be president, his desire to be president, is an essential element of the democracy that is symbiotic with the free press. So we say, you know, we like this chap. Now, I particularly like him because he sent me a note the other day saying that should Providence favour him, ASAP, he will pardon Assange. Going back to his tweet, it means this, that Robert Kennedy understands that without a free Assange here, there's no free press, and without a free press, there's no United States. So he's put his weight and his life behind that essential element of the United States Constitution, as I do, and as I gather we all do.
Other questions, my friend in the front?
If you, having heard what you just said, why did it seem from the film, why did it seem that you have changed the direction of your defense from the basics of what the charge is to the mental or physical condition of Mr. Assange? What was the process that you went through to get to that point?
Oh, you know, the first thing is, as Julian's family, we're principally concerned with his physical, emotional, and mental well-being. That's number one. Okay. Number two is we need a chariot to carry that and carry what the meaning is. The meaning is, of course, in 1948, Eleanor Roosevelt and a man named Herbert Bear Evan, an Australian, under their aegis produced the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is founded upon the Declaration of Rights in the United States Constitution. It was taken up by the Council of Europe, and they have Article 10, which concerns itself with the freedom of expression. Every single European nation embraced the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in one way or another through the Council of Europe. Equally, the United Nations embraces the work of Eleanor Roosevelt in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Conventions of Asylum came into being in 1958 and were ratified by the United Nations General Assembly in 1973 under the aegis of Australia. That's a mighty chariot that Julian's on board with. And that is how I bring the two together.
There's a question back here.
This person first, and then I'll jump to the back. I can't see you all back there because of the bright lights in
Yeah.
front, so my apologies.
So we're lucky now to have Zoom and to be able to network with people all over the world. So I've got some contacts in the UK and one guy in Manchester. He runs something called the A4 Army, which is that's like a letter size for people in the United States. They're posting signs all over Manchester for their, it's a separate action, but the point is they're pretty effective. If we do that here, there's litter fines. We get they stop us from doing that. Can you contrast the different countries and how effective they're, like the laws, and do you see differences? And one of the things I wanted to say too is that they papered the BBC windows in their local communities, just completely papered them over with signs. So they went right to the media. There's a campaign over there in Manchester to go after the BBC. So they're doing a frontal attack on the media. So yeah, if you could contrast different methods that you've seen as you've traveled around the world.
That's a good question. If I could continue the metaphor of the chariot, the people what pulls the chariot is us. We're the driving force of that chariot, and we're the preservation of those elements of civilization that came into being after the catastrophe of the Second World War. Now, we find in the United States that people are principally audio-visual, and then the written word follows. In Germany, for example, it's the other way around. They're principally like the written word, and then audio-visual follows. In France, we find they watch the film, and then they embark upon an hour or so of conversation. So they like to chat with each other. Sometimes in France, after a meeting, I think, oh my God, they're going to chat on for an hour and a half. But that's the way they do things. In the United Kingdom, it is as you describe. They have actions here and there, so they have placards and things like that. Yeah. Was that a good answer?
Thank you.
It's your answer, that's all.
Yeah, I think, we've seen, I'm a big fan of the Free Assange graffiti, which is not necessarily, I'm not encouraging anyone to break the law or whatever, but, whenever I see that, you're always posting it online and posting it up everywhere, and, I think that sort of presence and part of the movement's very important. In Australia, we see the MPs or the Congress people's equivalent, their offices have Free Assange stickers, plastered on them, people writing in chalk on the pavements, all those sort of different things. They're all great ideas and ones to copy and mirror everywhere else.
Thank you. Question in the back that was pointed out earlier?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. The question that was asked by the person towards the front was to expound upon the different tactics that have proven successful in different nations whereby they have fought for the freedom of Julian Assange.
Well, first, thanks so much for coming to Milwaukee, the two of you, and your persistence in supporting Julian during many long years of terrible treatment. I wonder, in case we need a reminder of the hypocrisy of the U.S., the film does a good job in various ways on that. Our own war criminals go free while the person that tells the story, the messenger, gets just sent to hell, basically. The little clip of President Biden talking about the truth, and then, well, coming back on it the next day or so. I wonder, though, if this hullabaloo about the U.S. reporter that was arrested in Russia and talks about, well, we must have freedom of the press and such, I wonder if there's any opening there for bringing Assange into that conversation and, one more way to put it in front of the public.
Thanks. I see around the place, they want to exchange Julian for, and the people make these proposals, but I don't see anything there, hostage exchanges or that sort of thing. I do see Julian as a hostage, and as a hostage that serves to chill and oppress, truncate, blight the First Amendment, and anybody who, a publisher, for example, and now I imagine think many times and consult their lawyers before they publish public interest, national security information. I imagine that this slow motion crucifixion, if you like, in front of our eyes, or slow motion death, as Melzer characterizes the malicious treatment of Julian, would give hesitation to any publisher embarking on publishing national security information. It's a curse, really, because the publication and absorption by us of information increases the community and national intelligence of the citizens of the United States. And subsequent to that, really important, increases the quality of administration and the policies that governments consider. Really important to understand that our consumption, if you like to use that word, of information helps produce quality in government policy. You don't have to do anything except know, because healthy people and healthy communities, as you see, an example sits between us now, healthy communities actually act upon the information that they've absorbed and set up institutions which rectify problems and seek to produce better policies so that those problems don't emerge anymore. It's a magnificent thing. I can't give too much praise and accolade to it.
I'll just add that, what's what's happening to Julian, these Espionage Act charges are becoming a template. And I think that's a way to look at this Espionage Act prosecution against the Wall Street Journal journalist as well, that, you know, it's a, you know, like a copycat prosecution. And interestingly, I spoke, we were in Chicago at Columbia College a couple of, was it yesterday? Anyway, yeah, this week. And one of the professors there writes a column for the Washington Post. And she told me, I'm going to do that comparison in my column, you know, that this precedent has been, is started here in the US and is now being copied against journalists in Russia. So I think that is a way to really raise the, you know, Julian's case here, is to say, you know, this is a template for these governments. You could look at Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia as well. You know, so these things are, they'll just keep happening again and again. And really, the State Department has sort of, you know, I guess you saw Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell come out calling for a free press, and you know, people, people laugh. That's exactly the right reaction, you know, because of what's happening to Julian.
Chris.
Thank you guys so much for coming and presenting the film. I'll stand up so you can hear me. So a couple of years ago, I traveled to DC on behalf of freedom of the press and Julian's case. And I sat in front of Merrick Garland's house, and I played my music. And I was really only there because I was inspired by Julian's and wanted to get the answer to the question, why? So I spent the entire day there asking why, and then I went to the Washington Post asking why. And the why was, why is this man in prison? He hasn't been charged of a crime. And now think about it, he's been in isolation now. At the time it was 11 years. So why is he in prison? He hasn't been charged of a crime. And I still don't have the answer to that question. Okay, I still don't understand why Julian Assange is in prison. The charges from Sweden were dropped. They actually never brought charges. So can you guys answer the question, why is Julian in prison legally? What gives the UK the right to imprison a citizen of a different country?
Well, he's there solely at the request of the US DOJ. They've requested he be there, and I think that.
But is there, what legal law is there that?
I think, you know, if we go back and look, as you know, there's Nils Melzer's book, The Trial of Julian Assange, is full of abuses, you know, of the British judiciary, of the legal system, and you know, we talk about what's happening to Julian in this legal process, and we call, you know, it's a veil of legality that is hung in front of this ongoing persecution and torture of Julian. And the reason he's there is to send a message to everyone else that if you do this, if you publish this information, you won't have any rights. You won't have any right to due process. You know, you will be held incommunicado. We will take you away from view. You know, Julian hasn't been allowed to attend any of his court hearings since January 2021. So that attending the court hearings was the one time that we would actually see an image of Julian, because they would take a photo of him in the prison bus. And even that's been taken away. So if you look online now, you scroll through the photos of Julian Assange, there's no photos of him for the last 3 years. You know, he's been totally taken away, taken out of view, dehumanized. And it's to send this message to everyone else who might think that they're going to publish this sort of information, that this is what we can do, this is what we will do to you.
I understand that, but what I don't understand is the legality of a country I just don't understand.
There is none.
There is no, it's not legal. So the answer is, it's not, there's no legality.
No, I mean, John has a great story that he tells about an Irishman who can, maybe you want to do a tad on it.
So we were at an event in Dublin with Claire Daly and Mick Wallace who just set up like this, a couple of great fighters for justice they are. And I was hesitating to criticise the British judiciary because the lawyers always say, don't get the judges offside. So I was looking for a way to say, something about the British judiciary, and I started off, and then an Irishman stood up in the middle of it, and he said, "In the shadow of the moon, John, in the light of the sun, there's nothing you can tell us about the English judiciary."
Excellent. Let me gaze through the light to the back and see if I see someone. I can see the front. Is there something right there under the AC? You.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, has Stella and the children been actually physically able to see Julian in prison? Or are they not allowed still to go in?
They're able to see him. So he has a visit from Stella and the children around once a week now. So that's, that's what, it's those sorts of things and the phone calls you see in the film that really, are keeping him alive in there, and the reports back of, that John gives or Stella gives about all the support that's out there. So those are really, those visits are very, very important for Julian to be able to keep fighting this case.
Excellent. And then my friend in the red.
I have a concern. If Julian was to be freed, what stops America from getting him anywhere? Even as the gentleman was asking, why did you go to defending Julian on the basis of him harming himself? Britain and America have extradition agreements that Britain can certainly not say, no, we will not let him go because you're gonna kill him. So the only way that they could, if I may say so, defend Julian is by saying Julian will harm himself if he goes to the United States. In a way, they are, I think that way, that they are saving him by keeping him where he is. So unless Julian was to go to Russia or China or maybe North Korea, where else can he be counting that he's going to be alive longer than perhaps days before America gets him one way or the other?
That's what
let's take one step at a time. Julian's out of jail, we'll find a way to protect him.
Great response. And then my friend up here, and then the person with the cap.
Hey, my name is James. I'm an organizer here in Milwaukee. I just have one very simple question. So when organizing around an issue like this, there's always many different ideas floated of what is the most effective thing we can do. You guys are his family, what would you have us do?
Yeah, I can just, as I said earlier, we're all, what we're doing at the moment as we travel around the country is encouraging people to call their congressperson, call their representatives. That is the one thing that we're, asking everyone to do. And I think, we're seeing from this letter, this letter that's going around Congress at the moment, that it's sort of having an effect, that it's actually, that it's working, and we're going to get more sign-ons to this letter. So that's what I would, encourage everyone here to do on Monday, is look up the congressperson's phone number and give them a call.
As you're youthful and you have, youthful vigor and creative imagination, what we did some years ago is we sat down with 3 people, got phone numbers in the electoral district, I think you call it the electoral district, of the congressman and their congressional office, and we rang them all. And just wrote, their responses down and sent them back up emails to, so often the staffers say, well, we don't know anything about that, So we sent them out just a bunch of information, not complex, just simple, quick read stuff, and then rang them back and said, you've had a look now, what do you reckon? Can you act on this at all? And this built a foundation to where the Australian Parliament now, it has 25% of its members in the Assange cross-party group. Now that's 25% that in the official group. The periphery of the group, you would say that we're now getting up to around half of the Parliament. So we're now looking at the possibility of a motion in Parliament to insist that the government do something. The thing is, this works 2 ways. It's interesting. We have to help the government. Confront's not a good word, but insist that the United States act in the interests of the Australian Parliament and people. We have to help them. They can't do it by themselves. The Roosevelt, back in the New Deal days, somebody came to him, I forget their name now, with the New Deal, or portions of the New Deal. And they laid out all of their ideas before him. And he said, oh, I like this policy. I can support it. Now make me do it. And make me do it doesn't mean to say that you roll up with a bunch of tanks, before Congress or anything as cinematic as that. Make me do it means that build the support underneath me so that I can enact the policy that you want. And that's been our attitude all along in Australia, and we've managed to do it. Well, so far we've managed to do it.
Good question. If anybody wants to engage further, I would encourage you to contact Dan Batista, who's in the back, or the information at the desk. And if you don't know how to contact your Congress folks, I'm easy to find, the Haunted Castle across the Fiserv. I'll give you all their phone numbers. One final, or 2, I'm lying. 2 questions. The person in the cap and then the person whose hand I can see silhouetted back there.
First, I do want to thank both of you and echo everyone's gratitude for you coming to Milwaukee and fighting for both your family and for, principal right that we have here. I think the film did, and your questioning and answering tonight does a great job of showing what appears to be an ebb and flow of your optimism. And I guess my question is, how do you manage that optimism with perhaps understanding the persecution of truth over history? And John, you mentioned once in the film Voltaire as a child. It is dangerous to be right when established authorities are in the wrong. How do you manage this optimism?
I think, really, Ai Weiwei in the film, he says, it's the fight that brings the meaning. And I think you sort of look back at that and sort of unpack that a bit and that, what's going on now and this sort of worldwide movement that has formed around the fight to free Julian Assange, that is sort of, his persecutors didn't see this coming, right? They didn't see, you know, every Western democracy have a cross-party, you know, Assange group in it. You know, a quarter of the parliament in Australia, a third of the parliament in Greece, you know, 40 MPs in the UK. So I think, you know, we get stuck in the mud a lot, but, you know, once you take a step back and you see what's really unfolding and what this fight is actually producing around the world, this network of people, I think that's, you know, it's encouraging to see, and that's why I always say, talk about faith rather than hope. You know, I have faith in people that once we talk to them and once they understand what's going on, that they usually join us.
But the personal part of your question is a bit funny, really, to answer. The oddity is that every grain of emotional energy, spiritual energy, physical energy, finance, intellect, disposal of resources, all comes to us from you. Without the support of many people around the world, we would be like the man on the street corner with a placard, "The world ends now, repent, repent." You know, we look quite mad. But we are elevated or carried aloft by yourself. That's the truthful and the absolute answer. It can be no other way for human beings, for together we prevail, separate we may not. The other thing is, I'd like to just point out quickly this, that Petro of Colombia, President of Colombia, is a supporter. Bolivian president is a supporter. The Chilean president is a supporter. Fernandez of Argentina is a supporter. Signed a letter the other day. Lula is a supporter, a strong supporter. His assistants, right, they call them assessors, their advisors, has contacted me 3 times. They've come over and did a photo of him. And finally, Andrés Obrador, President of Mexico, is a supporter. This is not light stuff. They're with us. Now, I don't know your term in baseball when the batter sees the ball coming and says a bit of a waste of time and lets it go through to the catcher. But in cricket, we have a term which says let it go through to the keeper or play it with a straight bat. Now, I see that the State Department plays this with a straight bat. They don't respond. However, we know that the State Department is deeply concerned about these matters, and that the support from those presidents of South America is vital, because that's the backyard, or the front yard, if you like.
And one more question in the back right, like I promised.
I want to say that we really appreciate what you're doing, being here and what you're dealing with, and it's just amazing what's going on. And I see this as kind of a focal point or of a larger issue, a larger problem that very sorely that most of our country does not recognize, that our government is so much more controlled and corrupt than what most people see. And we're seeing that everywhere if your eyes are open. And I'd like to mention a couple of websites where people, if they want good information and good places to refer people to who they know who have some interest, or are not very aware, they're good websites that explain very well what's going on. And one of them is stopworldcontrol.com. Another one is usawatchdog.com.
Is there a question, friend?
But, well, I got a lot of stuff going on.
Okay, no problem. Maybe we'll have Ann take us home, and then perhaps the Shiplins will be available for a little bit of conversation afterwards. Do you have any final words for us, Ann?
I want to thank everybody who came, and this has been co-sponsored by Peace Action of Wisconsin, Veterans for Peace, the National Lawyers Guild Milwaukee chapter, and the Milwaukee Turners. And with that coalition, I hope that we can really grow and put pressure on our representative, Gwen Moore, by everyone here tonight calling her office and saying, please sign Rashida Tlaib's letter and make your voice heard, urge Biden to free Julian Assange. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everybody. I want to say, heartfelt thanks. Thanks for rocking up. It's great. It's nice to meet people. Sitting beside me is Emilio del Torre. He runs the Turner. That's a nucleus of action. Combined with Anne, it's a nucleus of action, in particular to free Assange and also the First Amendment, to reinforce the belief in the First Amendment and the essence of the 1 to 10 Bill of Rights. So they're here. You don't have to go far. You've met them.
I'll just add one more thing. Just pop by the little table outside and pop down your email as well on your way out. Thanks for coming.
Thank you and good night.